What's up? This is Lenny Harold.
Man, Dave Hollister.
Teddy Riley.
What up, world? It's Jay Style.
Ladies and gentlemen, Blackstreet.
Migos in the building.
We are Migos.
Whoa, Migos, huh?
Yeah. This is your variety. We are 87.1 Caroline Radio.
You are listening to 87.1 Caroline Radio. KCGN, Bakersfield, your home for all your variety talk, just like Aaron's Opinion. Welcome back, listener. How are you? My name is Aaron Richmond, and this is the Aaron's Opinion podcast, streamed wherever you get your podcast or right here on Caroline Radio. Welcome back. Tonight, we have a very interesting guest. We have Danielle Main, the president of Leash of Hope Assistance Dogs. Welcome to Caroline Radio and Aaron's Opinion. How are you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I am doing quite well.
Very good. So I would like you to tell our viewers and listeners, most of whom are blind like me, tell us about what you do for Leash of Hope Assistance Dogs. By the way, I am somewhere in the world in an undisclosed location, but I have never heard of Leash of Hope Assistance Dogs. I do have, by the way, a retired guide dog from Guiding Eyes for the Blind, and she is very, very, very old now, and she's at the end of her lifetime. It's a bit of a long story, but she's very old, so she's still wonderful, even though she's very old. But tell us all about this organization, apart from the name, and I know generally what city it's in. I have not heard of it, so tell our listeners all about it if you would like. Go right ahead.
I would be happy to. And this organization is a small one. It's something that I founded with a colleague of mine about 5 years ago. And so we're from Vancouver, BC, Canada. And as we do this podcast, due to the pandemic, I'm at home. I'm not in my normal office. And so I apologize first off if there is any activity or dog noise in the background, anything of that nature.
No problem. No problem.
Because of the unusual circumstances. So, so the organization was founded by two people with disabilities. My other founder, Tessa Schmidt, has cerebral palsy and is in a power wheelchair. And I am partially sighted, low vision, and have been, I guess, legally blind, low vision my whole life. And
Right there. Yeah. You said something really, really interesting, and I love to talk about this with listeners. So at first you start out by saying you're partially sighted, then you say you're low vision, now you're saying you're blind. So I call myself blind. Just to introduce myself to you, I was born with glaucoma. I call myself blind. So I mean, do you call yourself blind, or are you sighted? Because it can I feel that it can be kind of a confusing issue for listeners to understand.
It totally is a confusing issue, not just for listeners, but I'm sure even like for public. So I tend to use different words because not everyone understands vision in the same way. And so I say partially sighted, legally blind, because I have a little bit of vision. I can see my best within arm's reach of myself if it's high enough contrast. And then after that, everything becomes quite blurry. I have an optic nerve degenerative disease that I've had my whole life. And I'm also fiercely independent and ambitious and tend to do things that I shouldn't necessarily be doing as someone who is low vision, but I find that it's a constant trying to have to explain myself to people. So it's unfortunate, but that means that changing the words, language you use to help convey your situation so that different people may understand your situation, sometimes helps and opens an opportunity to have a conversation just like this about visual impairments and blindness, because it's not as cut and dry as everybody knows as being not necessarily that either you're fully sighted or you're fully blind. There's a big spectrum in there.
I see what you're saying. That's all really interesting. For me, I call myself blind simply because I am, but fine. So, I would say, okay. I would say in if I heard your response, I would say that I would say that you are probably blind.
Yes, yes. As far as my specialists and any other medical people are concerned, I'm blind. But I'm also wanted to make it clear that I do have a little bit of vision, and for some reason that's hard for people to understand.
It is. And you know how I deal with it is I tell people I'm blind. I can see a little, and then here's how I explain it. I can't see well enough to drive a car. And then once they hear that, then that seems to be a tangible thing. But anyway, back to this organization that you set up. So what does the organization do? Tell us about it.
Right. So part of the reason why the situation of our founders is so important is because for us, not only is it, I think that it's really great. Everyone goes, oh, it's so great that, there's two people with disabilities that are running an organization. But I think it's a necessity. I think it's really important for public to see people with disabilities and in entrepreneurial positions and going for big goals and being ambitious. And so that's something that I encourage and kind of mentor in people as much as possible and support and within my community, whether that's, within Leash of Hope, our organization, whether that's supporting local artists with disabilities to help with different projects or hiring other people with disabilities. That's a key foundation of this organization that's built by two women with disabilities. And so the organization premise was Leash of Hope Assistance Dogs provides hope at both ends of the leash. We're a very small organization, but the concept was we train mobility dogs, guide dogs, psychiatric assistant dogs, and we take puppies that are from rescue situations, so they aren't bred from breeders, so oftentimes dogs out of shelters, maybe they've been donated to us or they've been rescued from places, and obviously we assess them and we ensure that we're picking appropriate dogs because we have a team of professionals. But it means that we are providing hope at both ends of that leash because we're saving a life and we're giving someone a lifeline.
Excellent. So what steps did you need to take to open this organization? How do you start basically a service dog school training facility? How did you go about setting all of this up in the first place? It's very interesting.
It is. And it's something that when you go to start an endeavor like this, people go, oh, you're nuts. Why would you do that? Or what are you doing? Because it's such an unusual thing, but especially for, again, two people with disabilities. But my colleague Tessa, she has quite an extensive background in service dog training herself. She's worked with other programs. And my background was in animal psychology at one point. When I had more eyesight, I was learning dog grooming and cared for dogs with special behavioral or medical needs, and that was one of my jobs. So between her having a very formal education as a dog trainer, specifically service dogs, and me dealing with these, I guess, intricate cases of, I guess, dog behavior and medical needs, we had quite the skill set. And the biggest thing that I brought to the table more than anything was being business minded and figuring out how to cross our T's and dot our I's so that everything was kind of done properly from the ground up. And Tessa's main role was producing a high standard of training in our dogs and our teams. And that's something else that's very different about our programs. We spend a lot of time with our handlers. And in doing so, we have handlers that are really well-rounded and don't need support in the long run because they've spent 120 hours with our trainers. So to set this up, for me, there was a lot of, approaching our local government authorities. There was obviously a lot of the boring stuff, setting up business licensing and things like that. So, and getting a board of directors since we are a nonprofit as well. And from there, it was just about growing. And we've grown with the intention of becoming an internationally accredited school, which has some pretty big hoops to jump through and a lot of red tape, but we've built our organization from the ground up with the intention of fulfilling those requirements. And even though it takes a lot of work, it's completely worth it, and it shows in the quality of the dogs that we provide.
Perfect. So good. So good. So tell me about your guide dogs. All of the dogs you train are equally important, but what's immediately relatable for me are guide dogs, because I still have one who is retired. So tell us about how you what the trainers go through, and then the handlers, and tell me about the whole course for them.
For sure. Now, my dog, I think he thinks he's retired because of the all the lockdown situation, which he doesn't seem too upset about. But he's 8 at this point. And he was the original Leash of Hope dog, and is my eyes. And he's very unusual looking, and I get lots of comments from public because he was a street stray from Mexico when he was a young puppy. And so he's spotty, with and red, and not your usual looking guide dog. And so that's one of the things that's interesting about our program is we do have a variety of different breeds that we use, and from a young age the dogs are aptitude tested frequently. They go through 2 years of training. It's about 1,400 hours of instruction with our staff. And after that, they do 120 hours with their client, with a trainer, so that the client has a lot of opportunity to have a lot of instruction, a lot of one-on-one time, so that they feel confident and supported, and not necessarily dropped out of the nest like a baby bird. And the benefit of that is that, we do have really well-rounded teams. Some people definitely prefer the more common setup that other programs have, of you go in for 2 or 3 weeks and you leave with the dog, and if you have problems, of course, your schools are a phone call away, whereas we spend a year kind of easing the team into a graduate status, and at the end of that, doing once a month kind of check-ins to make sure that they're good. And it creates a lot of leeway for and breathing room for especially newer handlers, newer people who are new to having dogs in public, to make mistakes and to feel okay and don't feel like the pressure's on them.
I'm already relating to what you're saying, because one of the things that is a challenge for any guide dog handler in the entire world is the public, the strange questions, the silly questions.
Totally. Yeah.
The constant can I pet your dog? Can I? And that last year, before my dog Nani needed to retire, it's kind of a long story that gets us way off track. But that last year, some of the last times that she was actively working, that can I, I would just politely say, no, I'm sorry, she's working. Or even, I admit, even occasionally, if it was okay, like a child who was really curious, if a child wants to ask questions, I would always educate people about it. But it can be very exhausting and very frustrating for the handler.
Totally.
It really, I mean, I love guide dogs, and I support blind people all over the world going to reputable organizations like yours, and like Guiding Eyes for the Blind. But it can be, when you have a guide dog for many years, that does start to wear you out. The constant issues from the public.
It completely does, and people can get jaded too. And so, I think it's hard as handlers for us to remember that, like, people aren't always ill-intentioned, and even though we're frustrated because we have the dog, and for some reason, oftentimes the public see the dog as an invitation to interact or ask us questions about our personal life, or try to touch or engage the dog.
Without tell. And I never encountered anyone when I had Nani, when Nani was working, nobody ever tried to hurt us.
No.
If anything, statistically, probably Nani kept the bad people away. Probably, although Nani is a girl. Nani. So Nani, for you at home, Nani is a girl black lab.